Hi guys, and welcome to our very first episode. And in this episode that is titled, What is the University Actually Forming Us Into? We are going to look at, well, frankly speaking, what the university is forming us into. But what I like about that question is it is one that is extremely loaded, and before we even get into all of the intricacies of it, we actually need to unpack some of the subtle and at times not so subtle implications and inferences, normatizations that are being made by that statement. And the biggest of which is the university is actually engaged in a deliberate act of forming you into becoming something. Because if we are to answer the question what the university is forming you into, we first of all need to concede that we are being formed. And this is part of the argument that I hold and that I advance, which is we need to look at university not so much as an extension of high school, but even high school itself was a particular kind of formation. But I am arguing that going through university is the process of going through academic formation. And when we talk about academic formation, we are literally talking about how we are being made into particular kinds of individuals. And the surprising thing is the kind of individuals that we are being formed into possess the kind of qualities that the university prefers, the kind of qualities that the university holds above everything else in the highest regard. In fact, I will go so far as to say the kind of qualities and characteristics that the university is forming in you are actually the ones that it praises and it rewards more than your ability to retain content. Now, let me say that again for those that might have been frazzled by the phrasing. The point I'm making is that the university is in an active process of forming us into particular kinds of individuals. We who hold particular characteristics that the university itself rewards more than it rewards your ability to retain content. So your ability to retain content, yes, it is important. In fact, some of us might actually believe that it is so important that it helps us pass exams. But one thing that you're going to immediately realize and recognize the moment you get into university and you attend your very first sessions is that the kind of thinking that you're supposed to do is now totally different. And yet, most of us, we come into university with a very common assumption, or the assumption has actually grown into more of a misconception than just a mere assumption. And that is, academic success is a moral achievement. Now, what we mean by academic success is a moral achievement. Now, the morality part of it isn't so much what is the problem with this assumption, but rather everything that proceeds from that assumption. everything that proceeds from that moralization, that is where the problem is. Okay, now let's go into it. When we talk about moral achievement, we literally mean that you are making it in university because 1, you are smart, 2, you work hard, 3, you are intelligent, and 4, you have a mastery of the content. And that is the fatal flaw, because that is not what makes you succeed in university. Yes, all of these things are important in and of themselves in order for you to actually do well, but they are not the primary core of what universities are trying to get at. Because look at it from this perspective. What happens to that moralized train of thought the moment you fail a course, you flunk your first assignment, or you completely miss the brief when it comes to a tutorial? Firstly, you are not smart enough. Secondly, you didn't work hard enough. Thirdly, you are incorrectly memorizing, or you didn't memorize enough. Or fourthly, you don't have a mastery of the content. Now, all of this is bad, but it is bad enough that you see the world through this moralistic lens, where you are going through self-deprecation, where you feel as if you are the one who's not doing all that you can. But what comes afterwards is even worse. You are actually going to invest more time in your reading. You're going to try and read more. You're going to try and memorize more concepts, more theories. You are going to summarize a whole lot more of the work that you have been given, and go even beyond that. You are going to dig in your heels, all as a way of making it out of the hole you dug yourself into. And yet, this is not where you are getting it wrong. The assumption that you are making feeds into how you look at yourself. And how you look at yourself and how you judge yourself is then going to inform what it is you're going to do to remedy the problem. And when it comes to the remedying of the problem, here comes the second challenge. You either do one of these two, which are both equally disastrous. One is, if you're a good student, a diligent student, have the right kind of thinking, you're going to dive deeper into the work. You're going to try and do more, because more is how you assume of what is required of you. But that is merely the best of the worst case scenario. The worst of the worst case scenario is you retire, you give up, you sit back in that dejected moralization that I'm just not smart enough. You take that into the second assignment and you still don't make it. What is that? That is now evidence that the first time might have been a fluke, But the second time around, yeah, now we get it. I'm definitely not smart enough. And if I'm not smart enough to get this, what do? I either change the degree, which is what we see a lot of students doing at the end of their first year, because you're now carrying with you a string of fails, and then you get academically excluded because you didn't make it. And so what that reinforces is, I'm not smart enough. And a lot of students drop out entirely, or they merely pick a different degree. And what they fail to recognize is that they are taking two things with them wherever they go. Firstly, themselves, because you are still the same person who's going into a completely new degree, and you're trying to pick this up and trying to see how well this is going to assist you. Yet it doesn't. Why? Because you're also carrying the second thing, the same misconception. You are carrying it with you. And that is not helping you. It is actually the burden that is sinking you. You are holding on to a metal anchor as a float. You need to change your thinking. And so what university is actually forming you into requires you to understand that the very first assumption you have is the very first hurdle you need to overcome in order for you to be formed into the kind of person that university is going to be rewarding you for being. Secondly, when we talk about formation in a university, we need to understand that university is an epistemic system. And because it is an epistemic system, it demands a different relationship to knowledge. As we've been saying, in high school, we knew what we had to do. But the moment we come to university and we assume that university is just harder school that requires us to read more and to concentrate more on the concepts, where we are meant to reproduce what we have learned, what we have read, we are never going to become the best versions of who we are meant to be through academic formation. Precisely because we continue to look at reading, for example, as an intake of knowledge, where we look at writing as a task to be completed by neatly following instructions, and an assessment, we look at it as a checklist of deliverables. But we actually need to go beyond that. We need to understand that reading, academic writing, and even academic thinking, as well as assessments, now are framed in a completely different epistemic framework. And what we mean by epistemic framework is that our relationship to knowledge is different. Textbooks, academic articles no longer are presented to us as containers of knowledge. We are now going beyond, because we are no longer taking what they say as gospel truth. We are now situating ourselves in relation to what we are learning. And we are inhabiting a new disposition as scholars who are engaging with knowledge rather than merely consuming knowledge. At the core of this epistemic transformation is the realization that we as students going through academic formation are becoming equals, if you will, where our own views also matter. And even though you are going to be taught that in first year, second year, third year, all throughout undergrad, excuse me, you are not yet an authority and you do not have a say. Oh, that is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have an idea regarding what you're reading. And so what you need to do is to reposition the way you approach knowledge, the way you approach authors. You are no longer merely reading precisely because you are getting content from the text. You are reading as a way of understanding the conversations that are taking place in that particular field, in that particular topic. And this is at the core of that epistemic system that you need to get baptized into, for lack of a better word. And thirdly, we need to actually define what the core element of academic formation is. And at the core of academic formation are two concepts that we cannot do without. And these concepts are judgment and disposition. Now, when we talk about academic judgment, this is where we are saying you need to develop the capacity to make sense of complexity, to organize meaning, to justify the decisions that you take, and to clarify the position that you take in relation to the information that you are working with. In any assignment that you are going to be encountering, you are required to have an argument. So what is your argument in relation to what you are writing, in relation to what you are reading? But at the core of this is you. What is your argument? How are you justifying? How are you conceptualizing? How are you organizing? In high school, we would receive knowledge from our teachers and books as gospel truth, something that we cling to because it has already been tried and tested and is being presented to us as the final product that animates how and what we are supposed to know about any given element within the field. But in university, we are the ones that are supposed to impose judgment on what we read. Because when we read it, we need to understand. But who does the understanding? It is us. So how do we understand? How do we organize information in a way that makes sense to us? All of that is dealing with judgment, academic judgment. So you literally become the center, the focal point around which everything that you are reading circulates. Precisely because when your lecturer, when your professor asks you a question, he wants to hear not just your ability to retain the facts of a particular matter, but for you to weigh in on that particular matter. And now this, you tend to find it even more so within the humanities. What's your view? Because the one thing that you immediately pick up is that academic texts are weighed. Yeah, we weigh academic texts. So not all texts are the same. Not all texts are doing the same thing. And even for all of the texts that are doing the exact same thing, not all of them have the veracity or the force being applied in equal measure. And we also begin to realize or come to the understanding that academic knowledge is always important precisely because it is contextual. And the moment we start to talk about the contextualization of knowledge, we are now coming to grips with the idea that certain knowledge only makes sense within given contexts. But who makes that determination? It's you. So when you are writing that assignment, you are the one that knows and understands. And so MOAD is going to be trying to help you unpack all of this. When we talk about disposition, this is an academic attitudinal character that one ought to possess, which is incidentally the thing that universities tend to value the most and also highly reward. But what is it? So I'm going to give you an example. Something as seemingly mundane as embracing openness. Openness. All right. So what does openness mean? Openness is something that is seemingly insignificant but has far-reaching implications, precisely because if I am more open, I am also making particular assumptions, which is, if I'm open to new knowledge, I am also open to the very reality, not just mere possibility, that I don't know everything. So I don't know everything. And because I don't know everything, it means that there is a possibility that other people might know certain things that I don't know. But the moment I make that assumption that other people know certain things that I don't know, I'm also now making yet another intuitive leap, which is the way that I approach others needs to be measured in full recognition that I might not know everything. And if I was to summarily dismiss what someone else is telling me, I might throw out some of the information that I need to possess. And the moment you even start to think in those terms, you also come to the understanding, the realization that you are actually not a blank slate. You do know. You might not know everything, but you do know. And the things you do know contain errors as well as correctness. So there are certain things that you know that are correct. There are certain things that you know that are wrong. And there are certain things that are wrong that you know that you don't know are actually wrong. And your ability to understand the difference cuts right to the heart of academic formation. But if you possess knowledge that is both correct and incorrect, others also possess the exact same thing. And your ability to measure and judge and sift and weigh what is right and what is wrong isn't determined by rightness itself. It is determined by context. Now we get into some of those uncomfortable truths that you're going to come into as you go into university. Truth, while important, ceases to be the axis around which we circulate and around which we organize knowledge. It is context. Because if two things can be correct at the same time, and yet those two things are totally different, it therefore means that there are multiple versions of truth, which are only determined by context. Because in my context as a male, this is certainly true, but in your context as female, what I'm advancing as truth is false. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what I am saying is any less true, neither is what you're saying any less true as well. So if you have a truth, I have a truth, and those truths aren't necessarily one and the same thing, what then is required is our ability to take up that position where we look at truth as being contextual. And I know this is a very controversial thing, especially when we look at the hard sciences, because we say the truth is the truth is the truth. All right. We often strive for objectivity. But here's the truth as well. Even something as seemingly arbitrary as the boiling point of water is not the same figure across the globe. As you shift altitudes, that truth of the boiling point of water is going to shift. And so when one says the boiling point of water is, I don't know, for example, 50 degrees Celsius, and when another person says the boiling point of water is 100 degrees Celsius, they are both correct, even though the figures that they are presenting are different, precisely because at sea level, the boiling point of water is totally different to the boiling point of water at the top of Mount Everest. But that's not to say the water isn't boiling at any of those temperatures. Context. And so when we talk about that openness, the example of dispositional character, that attitudinal character that we're talking about, it cascades into all of these things. And the very fact that you know and understand that you don't know everything, even though you do know stuff, what that actually tells us is it informs how you even interact with academic sources. How do you engage in those kind of conversations? All of that actually emanates from openness, because now you are measured in your approach. The very fact that there are certain things that you might not know doesn't mean you have to shy away from engagement. It just means you need to be strategic with how you engage. And now, the fourth element that I want to talk about as we talk about or have this conversation around academic formation and what university is really teaching you, is that most of the things that we've spoken about, universities hardly name all of these things. And not only do they name them, they still require those things. And this ultimately creates an uneven advantage that ultimately results in what I call academic elitism. So if you're unaware of all of the things that we've been talking about, it basically means that come assignment time, you're going to get it wrong. But it is the few that understand this that are going to be rewarded, because they are actually going to be doing things correctly. And the very fact that there are very few that get it correctly literally means that those are the people that are ultimately going to be pushed forward by the system until the very end. And the universities and the academic systems are going to reproduce themselves through these individuals. And these are the individuals that get all the brownie points. But what MOAD is trying to do is to say, let us put everything out in the open so that everybody has an equal footing. I know there are some people who are late bloomers. I myself was one. And so I certainly understand that there are others out there. But once we possess the information, the fundamentals of what the expectation of university is, we thrive, we soar, and we take off. And others tend to take off way too late. Either in your final year is when things crystallize, but you've already lost out on all of the formative years, and you are now playing the worst race of catch up because everybody is now far ahead of you, or you realize it way too late to a point that you are even out of the university system, and then it finally clicks. And so these are the issues that MOAD tries to talk about. Now, as we wind things down, as we come to a conclusion, I want to leave you with this thought, idea. If you are being formed, you are responsible for that formation. So who you ultimately become and how you become that person is squarely in your hands. But you need to understand that universities are actually trying to form you. They're trying to get you to think differently, to see the world differently. And we need to see a reflection of that formation in the way that you read. So when we talk about academic reading, it is more than just an uptake of facts. It is a detective who is trying to sniff out particular truths that make sense in a particular situation. When we talk about academic writing, it is an extension of your thinking. So your assignment isn't merely a declaration of facts, but you are showing us how you arrived there. And so your academic thinking, your academic writing, and your academic reading are all cornerstones of the same exact thing. And that is the epistemic move that universities are making. All right. Anyway, thank you guys. I know that was a mouthful. You need to unpack all of this. But join me in the next session as we look at episode 2 and we take it a little deeper.